Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello, and welcome back to the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm really excited. Not only is this a brand new platform for me, but many of you have been following my radio show for, goodness, over 4 decades. But I've ended my radio show, and on the advice from my PR folks and the people that I work with, they told me I needed to embrace technology. So that's what I'm doing now, and I hope that you're going to like it. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm still going to continue to bring the best minds and the best voices in the natural products industry, but I'm also going to be having professional athletes, entertainers, and public figures on here as well. People that have a message that we could all benefit from. It's all basically about information education. We all want to get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy. But the thing is, we need to remember that if we don't take the time to listen, ask questions, and make changes, we'll always be exactly where we are. So today, I'm very excited to have someone who is very important to me, someone who I follow, someone who has been an icon in our industry, someone who is still an icon in our industry that I've had on my radio show many times over the years. Jonny Bowden is going to be with us today. If you have not been familiar with him, I'm going to give you a very brief background, but you're going to love it. He is a board-certified nutritionist, a best-selling author, and a nationally known expert on weight loss and anti-aging, and just so many other things. He's been on Dr. Oz, The Doctors, ABC TV, MSNBC TV, CNN, CBS TV, CBN, Fox News, NBC TV, and dozens of morning shows in America. He's written or contributed to articles in the New York Times, Forbes, the Daily Beast, the Huntington Post, Vanity Fair Online, Men's Health Prevention, and oh my goodness, so many more. He is the author of 15 books, including bestsellers Living Low Carb, The 150 Healthiest Foods on Earth, and today's topic, the book with cardiologist Dr. Stephen Sinatra, the controversial bestseller, The Great Cholesterol Myth. And I want to let everybody know that there is an updated version of this, and I'm going to be getting a copy of that myself. Before I welcome you real quick, I want people to remember that we've been hearing a lot of things about cholesterol. We've been hearing things about all fats are bad and cholesterol can only be dealt with one way and that statin medications are the only way we can deal with this. I want to bring information because that's the foundation of this podcast, is information and education. So help me welcome my guest. Hey, Jonny.
Hey, Jeffrey. What a pleasure to be here with you on your first podcast.
I'm so glad to have you here. It's always exciting when we have the availability of being able to have people, that have so much passion as well as knowledge. And, I think this is an interesting topic. I think that we're going to be able to really talk about this and maybe put it in terms where people can say, why didn't I know that? So where do you think we should start? Maybe just talk about cholesterol in general. Cholesterol is not a bad word.
Well, I'd love to start with a quote from the best anti-aging book ever written, which is not my book. I'm going to promote somebody else's book. It's Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive. The best research, the most up-to-date, the most scientifically backed. It is a masterpiece. And this is his quote that I want to start this conversation off with.
Okay.
Total cholesterol. The number that you come back from the doctor, my cholesterol is 243, whatever it is, that total cholesterol number, here's his quote. Total cholesterol has as much to do with your risk for a heart attack as your hair color. Wow. In other words, zero. Total cholesterol is a meaningless number. No one practicing functional medicine, medicine 3.0, whole person medicine, even looks at total cholesterol. Now, HDL and LDL, you get a little bit more information, but even that is very out of date. Now, this is not Peter talking, it's me. When we first, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but when I was a kid, they used to have health fairs. And a health fair was like we didn't have health food stores. We didn't have a Whole Foods, nothing. This was like people who ran, for exercise were considered weird. So it's a very, very different time. And they would have these health fairs where they would try to kind of educate the public about what to be looking for. What's blood pressure? How do you measure it? Is that important? And they would have a little booth there with a couple of doctors, and you'd go by and they'd take a finger prick, a blood spot, and they would measure your total cholesterol.
Wow.
And they would say to the people, "Oh, Mrs. Jones, you're doing fine. It's 240. That's very good." That used to be the standard back then. They keep dumbing it down lower and lower so that they gain 10 million more statin patients every time they lower it. But it was 240 at one point. And they'd say, "Mrs. Jones, that's pretty good." Or, "Mr. Jones, that's a little high." All of a sudden people were aware that there was this thing called cholesterol. And all we had was total. A decade or so goes by, they start really looking at this stuff under a microscope. They start learning a little more about it. And they go, "You know what? The cholesterol actually travels in two different kinds of packages. One is high density and one is low density." And by the way, Jeffrey, all that means when people go, "What's high density and low density?" It means if you put it in water, the high density one will sink. And if you put it in water, the low density one, because it's not heavy, will float. That's all it means. Okay.
Yep.
So you had these low density lipoproteins and these high density lipoproteins. And they did not quite function the same way. So in an incredibly simplistic attempt to make this clear to people, they said, well, the HDL one is kind of the good one, and the LDL one is kind of the bad one. And that was a lot better than total. Now we knew that that it's not all the same stuff, and, that has different functions. And that was kind of, if you want to use a cell phone analogy that was like going from that handheld, big clunky phone that they used to have. You can still see on Google, if you say cell phone use in 1980s, you see people walking with satellite phones the size of a,
I had one of those. I remember those.
And then what happened when we got the flip phone? Wow. I remember when the Razor came out, everybody was like, they were bidding on it on eBay, right? The little flip phone that you couldn't text on, that just, that one. That was a big improvement, wasn't it? Over the
Sure.
Right. Just HDL and LDL were an improvement over that phone that looked like a Buick. But that's 1963. That is like the fact that we are still using this cockamamie good and bad cholesterol division would be like if everybody just went back to using a dumb phone, a flip phone that was great in 1960, the equivalent of 1963. But really, when you got iPhone 15s and Samsung Galaxy 9, really? You're going to use a flip phone? But we are using that flip phone every time we look at HDL and LDL and nothing more.
So let me ask you a question. Why is it, and is it completely embraced throughout the medical community, that cholesterol is the mainstay factor for heart disease and cardiovascular infarctions and strokes and all this? And is there anyone that's coming along and realizing that we have to look at things a little bit differently? Is it getting any better?
It's getting slightly better. There are more people now. When I talk about this stuff, it is not like, "What are you talking about?" So yeah, well, we know that. There's a lot of we know that. I participate in lots of low carb message boards with doctors who are in hospitals. They hit a brick wall when they talk to their colleagues, but they know this stuff. They know it very well. If you go on YouTube and you look at lectures from people like Robert Lustig, who is the brilliant pediatric endocrinologist at University of California, Santa Barbara. If you look at lectures by David Diamond, who takes the analysis of the statin literature and puts it up on a graph and shows you exactly why it's misleading, you will hear people who are very aware of this stuff. Ivor Cummings, who is a thought leader in the skepticism world, if you will, who look at some of the conventional wisdom about nutrition and go, "Wait a minute. This makes no sense." And there are lots of people who are on board with the notion that looking at cholesterol as the sole cause of heart disease, or as even the number one factor in heart disease, is very, very old kind of thing.
So if someone is learning about cholesterol, HDL, I've always said HDL meaning H for happy, good cholesterol, and LDL, L for lousy cholesterol. And we want a lot more of the happy than we do the lousy. Is that still something we can still adhere to, or has that changed?
I think it's pretty old-fashioned way of
Mm-hmm.
looking at it. First of all, the first thing that people have to understand, just to get it clear in their minds, there's no such thing as good and bad cholesterol. It is the same cholesterol. So the best example, folks, you're going to go on a train. One direction goes to California, one goes to Philadelphia. If I get on the one to Philadelphia, I'm on the Philadelphia train. If I get on the train that goes to California, I'm on the California train, but it's still me, the passenger. I haven't changed. I don't have a new identity when I'm on Philadelphia and a new identity. So if you look under a microscope and you look at the cholesterol in HDL and you look at the cholesterol in LDL, it's identical. There's nothing different about it. What's different, and this is the entire kind of nutshell of the great cholesterol myth and the revised edition. Where the action is in the lipoproteins, not what they're carrying. So let's understand what a lipoprotein is. It's a little package that has some cholesterol, some triglycerides, some protein, and a bunch of other little stuff, microbes. Cholesterol is the cargo. The lipoprotein is the boat. If you are trying to prevent boating accidents, if you're in charge of a marina, what do you care about? The number of boats in the water. You don't care about what they're carrying. Sure, if the boat explodes, all the towels and all the beer and all the whatever else people bring on boats is going to scatter into the water, but that's not what caused the explosion. What caused the explosion were boats hitting each other. So that's what you want to know about. And the newer cholesterol, and when I say new, it's a joke because these cholesterol tests have been out for 15 years. But the modern cholesterol tests, the ones that people aren't getting, actually tell you how many boats are in the water. They measure particle number. Particles is science word for LDLs and VLDLs and those. They measure the number and they tell you particle number, dangerously high, moderately high, green zone, good. None of this good and bad cholesterol stuff.
Well, and I wanted to lead this that way because of the fact that I know there's been so many different changes, and I don't think people have really, reached out for the new information. And I think once we reach out for new information, we start to have those aha moments, and we open up parts of our brain to learning new information, because I really do think that people do want to be healthier. And I know we don't want to do the work. I know we want a magic wand. I mean, that's just human nature. But the thing is, I think people do want to understand better, because let's face it, most people, and I've been there myself. You go to the doctor, you have a conversation, you walk out, you're more confused than when you went in. You're leaving with all these little white pieces of paper. You go get these prescriptions filled. People don't ask about them. They don't ask questions. They just fill it and take them. And if you ask the average person today why they're taking something, they can't even remember why they're taking it. And statins have become a very big part of that. Are statins as popular today as they were 10 years ago?
Yes,
They are.
and I want to make something clear, because when we published The Great Cholesterol Myth back in 2012, and when we did it again in 2020, we got skewered by many people in the medical establishment for being anti-statin. We're not anti-statin. We're anti-propaganda. And we're anti the overprescribing of a drug that has modest to no effect in many populations and modest effect in others. And yet we have hung a $31 billion a year industry on lowering cholesterol with statins, and also in promoting the narrative that A, they have no side effects, B, they have no bad effects at all, and they are safe and wonderful for everybody. And if you're taking one, you don't got to worry about heart disease. And that is total and complete BS.
So here's another question for you. People feel that if you do have a cholesterol level that is, let's say, in today's prognosis in an unhealthy area, let's say a balance and whatever, is it always tied to obesity or no?
No. God, no. When I got the real cholesterol test, the one that I believe everybody should get but won't, and there are reasons why they can't get them. You can't blame this on everybody. Insurance doesn't cover them, and insurance really calls the shots. I mean, it's not just doctors who just want to bury their heads in the sand and not look at this stuff. Even when the doctor knows that's the right test to give, they won't give it, because if they order too many tests that aren't covered by insurance, they get audited. And if they get audited and they lose their Blue Cross connection, they're done. So doctors practice a kind of preventive medicine, not just with the patient, but with the insurance companies as well. So you got to kind of look at this as something you got to pay out of pocket for. I pay out of pocket for my cholesterol tests every year for the one I'm talking about. They're just, you're not going to get them. It's a rare doctor that will buck the insurance companies and prescribe them anyway.
You know, it's funny. I was in a doctor's office beginning of the year, and there was a woman in there that was very lean, very active, and she was sitting there next to a woman that was working on her weight reduction, let's put it that way. And they were having this conversation, and the lady that was very fit said, I have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high sugar, and I do everything right. And the other lady next to her, it was funny because she said, I'm sure you're familiar with that. And she says, no. She says, I have normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure, and normal cholesterol. And this conversation was ensuing. And I think that the whole idea was they were thinking to themselves that if you're overweight, you have to have all these problems. Now, obviously, obesity and being morbidly obese can cause problems. We know that. But it doesn't always mean, in this case, cardiovascular disease.
What you said is I won't say it's common, but every health professional knows cases like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I have, you asked, do you have to be overweight? I had, when I got the test I'm telling you about, the good one, I had very high, dangerously high particle numbers.
Wow.
And as you can, I mean, I'm 141 pounds at 9% body fat. I exercise every day for 2 hours. I eat phenomenally well. So yes, sometimes you get these risk factor numbers that don't seem to align with your lifestyle. And they are very puzzling. And you need a good clinical detective to work with you to figure out why that's happening. But to your point, when you're obese and when you're sedentary, statistically, it's much more likely that these risk factors like high blood sugar, high A1C, all the other stuff that we're talking about, they tend to happen more in people who are obese or just very overweight or sedentary. So the risk factors go up. There was a friend of mine who used to be the editor-in-chief of Muscle and Fitness, and then he was the editor-in-chief of Bodybuilding Magazine. And he was what they used to call in the olden days a long drink of water. Guy was like 6'5", and he weighed pretty much what I weigh. I mean, he's the thinnest guy you ever saw in your life. Real athlete, all that stuff. Turns out he has diabetes. And he wrote a book about it called Sugar Blues, because there is this silent population of people who are perfectly thin, and look perfectly, like they don't have a weight problem or they don't have any other problem, and they are sitting there with diabetes. Doesn't happen often, but it happens.
What about genetics? Do they play a role?
Of course, genetics plays a role in everything, but it's often overestimated. So, folks, let me explain this in a way I think is the clearest I can make it. I used to have a slide that said genetics loads the gun, but behavior pulls the trigger.
I love that.
So if I had a gene, let's say there's a gene for lung cancer. There isn't. But let's say there was a gene that in combination with other genes made you more susceptible to the effects of smoking, because, there's a certain percentage of people who smoke all their life don't get lung cancer. Small percentage, just like we're talking about but there are some, right? Let's say I have the gene that guarantees me if I smoke, I'm done. I'm getting lung cancer. What do you think happens to that gene if I never smoke? Nothing. It's like a light switch that doesn't get turned on. So genes may make you vulnerable to certain things in your environment, like a high sugar diet. They don't give you the disease. There are very few diseases that are called monogenetic, meaning there is one gene, you get that gene, you got that disease. Cystic fibrosis, Huntington's chorea. You get the gene, sorry, game over, you get that disease. Most diseases have a genetic component, but it's wildly overshadowed by what you do in the environment, what you
I
eat, what
see.
you see, what you think about, what you interact with. Those are the things that really turn on the genes or turn them off or lower the volume on them. So the genes are a contributing factor. They're not as big a factor as most people think.
I have a friend that went on statins probably about 10 years ago because his cardiologist, he had a little arrhythmia, but beside that, everything was really good. His cholesterol was normal. His ratios looked fantastic. I wish mine had been that good. His triglycerides were low. He had a great diet, but the doctor said, we're going to err on the side of caution.
Of course.
And I'm going to put you on a statin. So he went on the statin. He's been on it for years. His cholesterol has never changed. It's always been really, really good. So he got a new cardiologist with a new insurance program. And the cardiologist said, why are you using this? And he goes, because I was told to. So they took him off of it, and there was absolutely no change at any level. And so he's wondered, did I waste my time? I said, I don't know. I said, it might have done something for you along the way, but isn't it great that you have a doctor that is newly out of college, open to all new things, and really would rather work more on the natural side? So it was interesting that it was more of a on the air of caution. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like I said, it's practicing preventive, defensive medicine, because the doctor wants to be able to show clearly that they followed the standard of practice. The standard of practice is if your damn cholesterol goes up to 201, you go on a statin. The standard of practice is insane, but that is the standard, and they don't want to be in any way liable for not following best practices. I want to be clear about two things with statins. One is they do some good, and it has nothing to do with lowering cholesterol.
That's great.
Slightly anti-inflammatory,
right?
And they thin the blood a little bit. Those are good things. Nothing you can't do with fish oil, nothing you can't do with vitamin E, nothing you can't, but they do those small things. The other thing I want to say about them is that you and I would take any drug. If we had fourth stage cancer, inoperable, some kind of thing that was just weird, there's no options.
Right.
And somebody says to you, here's a drug. It's got a bunch of side effects, but it might save your life. You and I are going to take that drug.
Absolutely.
Statins ain't that drug.
I see. Okay.
No, so the point is, there's a list of side effects this long with statins that the statin manufacturers spend a lot of lobbying money trying to convince doctors that's not true. It's all in the patient's mind. That list of side effects has been documented by a brilliant researcher at Stanford named Beatrice Golem, who literally surveyed all of the adverse reporting data, and she did a great Stanford study. And she found that 65% of doctors don't report adverse effects on statins. You want to know why, Jeffrey? They don't believe their patients. So the guys I play tennis with a lot of older guys. They go to the doctor and get on Crestor or Lipitor. Go back to the doctor and they say, Doc, I'm like forgetting my wife's name. And they, oh, no, don't. It has nothing to do with the statin. It's mild cognitive impairment. It's normal at your age. Or they go to the doctor and say, I'm getting leg pain. I got terrible pain since you put me on the statin drug. And they, no. It's a little early arthritis, Mr. Jones. It's not statin related. It's just, and they don't believe them. That's the job. That's how good the marketing material from the pharmaceutical companies to doctors is.
Well, I think the thing that scares me is, obviously, if you study herbs and nutrients from around the world, some of them have been around for 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, with amazing track records, things written in scrolls and on walls of caves and buried in tombs. And we're learning about it. And, the medical community, although life-saving, and it does have its purpose, I have no negativity toward that. I just think that people don't need to get on that train on the car. There's many other cars to try along the way before you may end up on the pharmaceutical. But the thing is, what do we know about somebody being on a statin for 30, 40, 50, 60 years?
And more important than that, what do we know about somebody being on a statin plus 10 other medications, which is much more common than just being on a statin for however many decades? And the answer is nothing.
So maybe give
I
people
am
some.
not anti-statin. I'm anti the brand extension that they've tried to do. They had a drug that had mild effects in a very specific population, middle-aged men with previous heart disease. And then they did brand extensions. Well, how about teenagers? Their cholesterol should be kept under. What about women? What about 70-year-olds? And none of this data applied to those groups. And in many cases, none of those groups are in any way really benefited by the statins. Now, if you look at some of the lectures I was talking about, David Diamond and people like that look at actually take the data from the studies and graph it out and show it to you in a different way, it turns out that the statins never save lives. If you took a group and you divide it into two, the way they do with a randomized study, and one group gets a placebo and one gets the statin, maybe in 5 years, you might have 1 or 2 less heart attacks in the statin group. They are offset by 1 or 2 more deaths from diabetes and cancer in the other group. So you have the identical mortality in the two groups. Statins don't save a single life.
So mention to my listeners, so people are going to be shaking their heads saying, okay, what are some things that I can do? And I think this is where confusion comes in. What would be your ideal diet for someone that maybe is in this category? And what would be a few things that you would recommend in the supplement arena?
Well, I'm going to answer part 1 and 3 of that. The ideal diet for that can't be discussed because of a number of factors. One is there is no ideal diet for everybody. Each, as you know, and maybe you set that up, but everybody is hormonally, metabolically, culturally slightly different, and we do not all respond to the same diet. And in one person, a vegan diet might work, not as many as you might think, but there are people. Joel Fuhrman, I can't deny, is a healthy guy in his 60s. He's vegan. I haven't met many like that, but they exist. And there are carnivore diet people like Dr. Sean Baker, who they put their blood work online. They are in perfect shape in every way. This guy's a world-class athlete. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records, that guy. And eats nothing but meat. So there are lots of ways to you have to talk about the perfect diet for this given person, not just in general. So I would never presume to try to lay that out. I will give you my best nutritional advice that I ever got coming up in my career and that I've ever given. And I've given it on 100 podcasts and in 1 million books. And I say it every time I do a YouTube. This is the best. This is the only nutrition advice you really need to take away from this podcast or any other. Eat real food. Not food that looks like real food. Kale chips are not real food. Food that your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother would have known exactly what to do with if she saw it. Oh, I know what to do with it. This you cook, this you do that. When they did the Blue Zone studies, they brought some of these older people in the centenarians, they brought them supermarket food. And they said, what is this? What is this? So real food, which trumps any diet, macronutrient distribution, any of that stuff that actually you could have, I say the Jonny Bowden 4 food groups. You could have hunted it, fished it, gathered it, or plucked it. So if you could pluck it from a tree, grab it off the ground, shoot it, or fish it, it's real food. Comes in a package, it's probably not. That's the rule of thumb. So that's the nutrition advice. The second thing that I would say is that, and we spent a third of the great cholesterol myth talking about this stuff. This, to me, is far more important than lab tests. It's more important than your cholesterol. It's more important than almost any metric you can see. And that is the way you live your life. That is the impact of your friends, the impact of your relationships, the impact of the groups you belong to, and the people that you hang out with. You mentioned, how do I look this way? Well, part of it's luck and genes. But tomorrow's my birthday. I will be 77.
Unbelievable. Happy birthday.
Thank you. My point is that when people ask me, what's your secret? What's the number one thing that makes you wake up with complete energy every day, never tired, always. And I should have mentioned, I got married 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness. Congratulations again.
Here's my point. The number one secret is my tennis group. We have a group of 20 people who are on a group text, and we play, some form of that group plays every single day for 2 hours with each other. We go out to dinner sometimes. We go celebrate each other's birthdays. A few of them we live in LA. A few of them are performers. We go to see their shows. We have a social group that is as closely knit as any social group you can imagine. And that, my friend, in my opinion, is the secret to life.
Live
Make
your life.
friends. And if you don't have friends, go out and volunteer. Talk to people. Be nice to people. Kindness, gratitude. These things, we talk about cholesterol all day. These things beat the hell out of cholesterol when it comes to actually predicting life and happiness and health. So, you know, if your numbers aren't exactly right and they're not perfect, I'm not saying ignore them. Do all the smart stuff that Jeffrey will tell you about and his guests will tell you about. But don't ignore the stuff you can do something about right this minute. Go to a shelter. Play with the dogs. I mean, these are the things that literally extend our life. That's why that person who walked in, who was all fit, and she said, well, I have high cholesterol, high blood sugar, high this, and that, but she's exercising, and she's fit, and she's probably happy, and she's probably connected. And that stuff is actually outweighing the bad test results.
So the book has an update to it, and the revised issue. I know you added new things to it.
Lots.
Where can people get the book? Because I really want them to get it.
Amazon, everywhere.
Amazon. So, you know, I want to thank you for being here today. Anything you want to say in closing? Final thoughts, birthday boy?
I think that was pretty much the thought, is that really, you know, we get so stuck on weight and lab tests and things like that we really forget the stuff that makes us human and makes us thrive and makes us happy and joyous. And it ain't just your weight. You know, I've said since I started my career as a personal trainer and weight loss coach, beauty comes in all sizes, shapes, and colors, and genders. It really does. So, you know, maybe a little bit of movement away from what does the scale say and more what does my heart say, and what makes my heart sing. You know, what people make me feel great when I'm around them, and what things that I can do, whether they're hobbies or volunteering or whatever, that really make me feel like I'm just expanding rather than contracting in some kind of toxic waste dump. So look for those things, because everybody can do that, no matter where you are on the fitness continuum, where you are on the weight continuum. You can look for moments of joy and connection to other people. And believe me, that's going to do more for your health than moving your cholesterol.
The incredible Jonny Bowden with me today. I thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke podcast. Remember to look for all of them. You'll be able to go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. You'll be able to click on your favorite, like you probably did today, your favorite little icon. We'll be on Apple Podcast, Spotify. And don't forget, if you want to watch the interview again or send a friend, you can send them to the YouTube channel of what'll be Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. I thank you all. Be well, stay healthy, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.